it takes so long to make a movie. It's like turning a battleship around quickly. You can't do it. That's why we're going to get a year's worth of nonsense. Thunderbolts is I mean, Gary and I saw the footage. We're watching it saying, why did they make this? Did they need to fill a quota? Like, it's bad. And clearly Marvel cannot do TV. TV has mostly been, Marvel on TV has mostly been dismissible. Maybe one of the highlights was the first half of the season of WandaVision, which luckily that director, Matt Shackman, is doing Fantastic Four. We got a glimpse of that. It looks like, as a longtime fan, I'm enthusiastic, with the exception of Pedro Pascal's casting. I think he's miscast. I think he is miscast as Reed Richards, but we'll see. But I think that post Secret Wars, you're going to see a soft reboot of Marvel. After they do Secret Wars, it'll have every cameo you can possibly imagine. Everyone, it's an all hands on deck movie. After that, I think you'll see a soft reboot, and maybe they'll recast Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, and just start anew. Maybe, Avengers in the 1960s or something. So we shall see. But I just don't think they can continue on one timeline. They just can't do it. They don't do it in the comics. How many reboots have they had? Mark, probably better than I. A lot of reboots, right?
Do you know what I think is going to be a real weakness for them, though, with a reboot? Because I agree. I think it's inevitable. The actors are aging out. They're all in their 40s now and some in their 50s. But what's going to be a real problem is this idea of a cinematic universe. I've always said this. What took the Marvel movies from making 400 million to 800 million to in the billions was the strength of that cinematic universe. Guys who were into one thing get into something else, and then this enormous amalgamation of fans who came to see the collective movies. But that's also your downfall too, because as soon as that edifice starts to crack, it all comes tumbling down. And it's really hard to just have a solo Iron Man movie come out of that, or a good solo Captain America movie. And it's funny because I think the cinematic universe is something, just from behind the scenes in a studio, that everybody was chasing for a decade, right? Everybody kept talking about the monster universe from Universal and so on. Pals of mine were all planning their universes and everything, but I actually think it's really unique to Marvel, and actually just unique to Marvel 2008 to 2019 in terms of it working. This has never happened before, and I don't really think it's going to happen again. I think the universe thing is kind of over, and people just want good movies. I went to see Wolverine Deadpool tonight, and I walked out before the end credits. I loved it. I loved the movie. It was great, but I didn't want to see the end credits. I just wanted to see a film. And I really miss that. I don't want to see something that's a tapestry with 20 Disney Plus shows I don't care about. You got to get back to those singular movies again. So if I were them, I would just strip it right back and actually not tie these things together anymore.
I think that we as humans have a limited capacity for what we can absorb in terms of TV shows, movies, how many different things tied together to make this overarching story. And I think the early phases of Marvel were smart about that because, one, you didn't have the fucking stupid Disney Plus shows. You just had 2, maybe at most 3 movies a year. They all tied into this overarching narrative, and that was fine. It was enough that you could keep abreast of what was going on, and it wasn't too much. Now we're at the point where there's TV shows everywhere. Not this year, obviously, because we're on the back of the strikes and everything got slowed down. But before this, there was multiple TV shows, multiple movies per year, and you had to watch all of it if you actually wanted to keep up to date with all of this stuff, what was going on in the MCU. It was just too much. It was far too much for people to keep up to date with, and it became like homework. It became like a chore to get through rather than entertainment.
I don't buy this.
Enjoy.
The fact is, these universes would be absolutely fine if they were made of good films. People go to see good films, and so at that point, it's almost automatic. But if you tell people they have to also watch this, 4 different TV shows, you don't. They can not only build them so that you don't, but you didn't have to. The Disney Plus shows oftentimes only contradicted the films. They never actually helped.
Well, they could have built it that way, but they didn't. They built it in such a way, if you were going to watch Multiverse of Madness, you had to have watched WandaVision.
No, you didn't, though. That's my point.
You did.
No, you didn't.
Can I just say,
like, how is Wanda suddenly become a villain?
No, what I'm trying to explain is the film was absolutely nonsensical with or without WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
There's no homework that's going to help you understand MOM. MOM was a fucking writing disaster.
It was, yeah,
Well,
but like you were still
it.
expected to have watched the TV show in order to understand the movie. Like even say the movie had
So
been very
you've
well
chosen
written.
The worst example because MOM was hyper successful.
The movie was worse if you understood what happened, because he's like, well, you know, we don't care about that. It's like, no, she was an evil villain during the entire series. She literally got a load of people, and they were horrifically treated during the entire thing. It's like, yeah, I know, you'd be a hero afterwards. So the more you understand about the history of MOM, the worse it gets. It seemed like a movie that was forcefully tied into a series they didn't want to be tied into with anything else.
But here's the thing: you give the audience an excuse to check out the minute they're allowed to miss something. So, for example, my children went to see every Marvel movie, and they didn't go and see Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness because they hadn't watched WandaVision. None of us watched it, and we didn't go and see the Marvels because we'd never watched the TV show, the Ms. Marvel TV show, or anything. So you feel once pieces of the jigsaw are missing, there's some subconscious thing in an audience where they think, yeah, this isn't now essential.
MOM, like I said, is one of the ones they're hanging on to franchise-wise, Doctor Strange, because it did really well. It was right behind No Way Home as like the only successes they can even call name to, which No Way Home doesn't count because it was Sony. The point I was going to make as well is that the other cinematic universes to compare, DC did have a long run, and some of them were pretty successful. Aquaman's obviously the hilarious like anomaly almost. The Dark Universe, or whatever the hell it was called, I don't even really think we should count it because they only had awful films as starters and then failed. If they'd had a great The Mummy and then a great Dracula or whatever, and a great, like, yeah, they might actually have started a universe as a result of good films being supported and watched anyway. The thing with the MCU was Iron Man was a great fucking film. Everyone loved it. And then The Incredible Hulk, Thor, Captain America, yeah. Iron Man 2, but Avengers, you know, it was like, it was enough. It wasn't even that phase one was made up of a series of incredible films. It was just they had enough to carry it through to Avengers, which I think was a great installment and came through on the promise of exactly what it was. And then it was like, as long as they have the tentpole movies that are successful and good enough, it can carry through a universe, as we saw. But then everything was falling apart after. It's just so funny to think about, because when WandaVision came out, we were asked on our show like how long it would take for the MCU to get to a point where it could release something that would flop. We're like, oh, you'd have to have like 10 to 20 bad installments in a row.
We got it. Yeah.
And that's what they did. And they absolutely fucking staked it right in the heart. And now it's probably dead. Because I do agree with you somewhat in that I'm not sure it can ever recover. I'm not sure they could ever get back to where they were now.
The trust is possibly gone with the audience, isn't it? I think the trust.
Yep. I think you can definitely get that back, though. But I definitely agree with you that you only have to be good enough, because people will forgive something as long as you have the benefit of the doubt. You can only look at like Doctor Who or Bonds. There were some iffy things in the middle on all those runs, but people would always see the next one because it might be good this time. And if you kill something long enough, then it's when they've absolutely given up on you is the worst. But I do think Marvel made the right decision with things like The Marvels. You didn't need to see the TV shows. But it is interesting that you raise up that people might think that you had to, because that's also what the articles are running with, all the journalists are running with. And although you didn't need to know to see it, to actually watch the movie, if people think you do, that's basically the same effect.
Yes. And imagine Bonds had tied in with Doctor Who and Star Wars and everything else, and they all sucked at the same time as well. You know, people are lost, you know? So I think
Star Trek might be tying in with Doctor Who.
But
I'm not joking.
Doctor Who, you can maybe get their trust back if you do a great season in 5 years' time or something, you know. But you know, when a whole universe is kind of fallen. Although in saying that, you know, I mean, this might lead us into Deadpool and Wolverine a little too early, but you know, that's back. You know, like everybody showed up. You know, so there must still be some love there that can be rekindled.
I think so, but like I don't think that love is unique to the MCU. I don't think people were going as Marvel fans to go see Deadpool and Wolverine. I think that was more they were fans of the Deadpool franchise, and to some extent they're fans of the Fox X-Men franchise. You know, that's really why they were going to see that movie, because it's like a kind of cap to all of that. It's a farewell, and I suppose it was another point I actually wanted to make. You know, the idea of like a shared universe. it was really pioneered by the X-Men movies of the 2000s, because it wasn't as developed as the MCU, and it was certainly not as slick and efficient as that ultimately became. But it kind of blazed the trail. It proved that it could be done. You know, you had the mainline X-Men movies, and then you had like the aborted attempts to do like origin stories. Then you had like the X-Men First Class, where they go back in time. Like, it was all this shared storyline told through different perspectives, different characters over different decades and eras, all tying into a central narrative. They never quite got it working in the same way that Marvel did, but they were the prototype for what the MCU would eventually become.
Do you know what was interesting though? I remember at the time the Fox movies were seen as the inferior Marvel films. In hindsight, they were pretty damn good, weren't they? There was there was a few stinkers in there, but there was some absolute beauties as well, like X-Men First Class, Logan, all this stuff. There's some of the really great ones were the Fox.
X-Men 2 is pretty kino.
Amazing.
Yeah. I think they had the passion. They didn't necessarily have the formula locked in. And it's just an interesting time, because it felt like that period where there was a lot of there was a lot of different attempts to find the correct way to make a superhero movie, and they hadn't quite locked it in yet. And so I always find the X-Men movies fascinating from that point of view, because they're like a diamond in the rough. They hadn't quite got it nailed. And by the time they did, the franchise was kind of dying out. A lot of the actors were aging out. You finished up with movies like Logan, where it's like they after 20 years they finally found the right fucking way to do a Wolverine movie, and it's like when Hugh Jackman's like 50 years old and just ready to retire. It's like, God damn it, why couldn't we have had that style of Wolverine movie? When they did X-Men Origins, like that would have been amazing if it had been R-rated, violent, gritty, brutal. That's what people wanted from a Wolverine film.
You know, there was that period where they hadn't quite figured out how to do superhero movies. I think specifically in the 90s, there seemed to be quite a lot of them coming out, and they were all terrible. You know, like Shaq as Steel and Batman and Robin,
yeah.
You know, and what's weird though is I was watching saw Deadpool tonight, and I saw the trailer for Venom 3, and it feels like one of those films. Doesn't it? It feels like one of those films from 1995 where they haven't cracked the code yet. And it's the same. It was the same with Morbius and all these things as well, doesn't it? They feel like they're made by guys who are not into superheroes.
Yeah, well, with the Venom movies, I don't understand why they keep getting made. I don't know who sees them or why. Like, I've seen both of them, and I can't tell you a single thing about either of them. I know Tom Hardy and Woody Harrelson are in them. That's all I got for you. I can't remember anything that happens. They're so forgettable. Right? I don't know if they made a lot of money. They obviously made enough that it was justifiable to do like the next one. But they just feel like this weird aborted attempt to have their own little cinematic universe, because I think they had the rights to Spider-Man, and they were still hoping that they could like bring him in to fight Venom. It ain't gonna happen. Like, forget it. But it's funny that they thought they could do it. Like that's there's the two titans of multiverses. Like, you had DC, which never quite got off the ground. You had Marvel, that was like incredible success for years and then like crashed and burned. And then you had Sony with their Venomverse, like this like fucking random subsidiary in between, like trying to make something happen.
Tom Hardy versus Tom Holland though would be terrifying, wouldn't it? I mean, he would leather that wee guy.
Oh yeah, like
he would leather him.
Well, that would be a great. Can we get Madam Web in there as well? Like, I think she deserves it.
I think it was
she earned her space.
Without Madam Web, we wouldn't really be aware of Sydney Sweeney, and I think we should all just take a moment to appreciate that.
100%.
That's enough reason for it. Make an R-rated sequel to it. Do it.
Yeah, do it. Come on, do it.